The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. Tensions between Israel and Iran have reached a dangerous new level. After years of shadow conflict, the two countries are now trading direct missile strikes. In just a matter of days, hundreds of civilians have been killed or injured on both sides. Israel has launched a series of powerful strikes aimed at dismantling Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile infrastructure. Meanwhile, Iran has responded with missile barrages that have lit up the skies over Tel Aviv and Haifa. Now, as a group of 7 leaders gather in the Canadian Rockies, the crisis is expected to dominate discussions. Efforts at diplomacy have stalled, while markets are reacting, and both Iran and Israel appear determined to stay the course. So where do things stand now, and what does this escalation really mean for the region? And how close are we to seeing this conflict spiral into something much larger? Well, to help us unpack these developments is Dr. Eyal Mayroz, who is a senior lecturer of peace and conflict studies at the University of Sydney. Hi, Dr. Mayroz. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, Doctor. We are now hearing that at least 224 Iranians have been killed in just 4 days, and 90% of those deaths are reportedly civilians. Meanwhile, missiles have hit homes and apartment buildings in Israel as well. So, Dr. Mayroz, what prompted this latest round of violence between Iran and Israel?
Well, it's been long coming. The rivalry and enmity between the two countries goes back to 40 years and more. The risk for Israel of an Iranian nuclear power, attempts by Iran to gain hold of such capabilities, has long been a very, very concerning issue, political issue, security issue for Israel, both domestically and internationally. And just been since, if you like, the demise of the Hezbollah organization or proxy, Iranian proxy in Lebanon last year, that Israel has decided that Iran is weak enough to challenge it directly, along with the notion, or at least the claim by Israel, that Iran is now reached the no return situation in terms of militarizing its nuclear facilities.
Right. Well, is this the deadliest and most direct confrontation we've seen between them in years?
Certainly by far. For decades, it was mostly shadow war, proxy war. Last year, for the first time, the two countries started firing at each other or bombing each other directly, but that was relatively a small scale compared to what we're seeing now. But certainly a major escalation between two regional powers in the Middle East.
Right. I mean, Israel has said its goal is to dismantle Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities, but critics point to the high civilian toll and the risk of regional war. What do you make of Israel's stated military objectives here, Doctor? Do you think there is a deeper agenda at play here?
Well, first of all, in terms of the number of casualties, I wouldn't take necessarily the Iranian numbers face value. Yes, it sounds like, more than 200 Iranian casualties, but how many of them were civilians, I'm not at all sure. In terms of the Israeli agenda, I think, when a country like Israel decides to go all out on Iran, there's usually quite a few factors and considerations involved. So certainly the main one being the situation with Iran getting very close to a nuclear capability, which for decades it has been saying that its objective, or one of its main objectives regionally, is to destroy Israel. So any country would be concerned. But as to other, considerations by Israel, the Israelis talk about, for example, regime change. How far is that, wishful thinking? I'm not sure, but certainly Israel has decided that now it's the right time for it to attack Iran and try to, take away or take off the risk that it sees as an existential threat.
Right. Well, meanwhile, Iran has vowed to, quote, open the gates of hell in response to Israel's attacks. Then how are you interpreting Iran's response so far?
I think both countries are in a bind at the moment, fourth day into the all-out fighting. Neither side is in a position to, stop the fighting and move to diplomacy. The Israelis have decided to not stop their bombing of Iran until they so-called destroy its nuclear capability, something that I don't think they can do. I think the Iranians have decentralized their system of enrichment facilities and other parts of the system enough so that even if Israel has inflicted and will continue to inflict severe damage on the system, the Iranians will be able to to build a bomb into the future. So the Israelis are kind of struggling with something that they are hoping to reach, but I think will not be able to make it, at least not militarily. And on the Iranian side, in the Middle East, honor, dignity are very important. Iran has suffered a major, shameful from their perspective, blow. And so they can't, lay out their weapon and say, let's go to negotiate, because they need to gain face, and gaining face will only be done through inflicting more damage on Israeli cities, if they can, military installations through their firing of hundreds of ballistic missiles.
Right, right. Well, Israel has said its Operation Rising Lion is aimed at disrupting Iran's nuclear weapons program, killing Iranian scientists and key revolutionary guards in the process. So, Doctor, do you believe the deliberate targeting of individuals tied to Iran's nuclear and military apparatus is a justifiable strategy, or one that risks further escalation and long-term instability?
Well, I think both. I think the Israeli strategy was to try and, assassinate, both through bombing, but also through apparently, units of Mossad that were on the ground, try to assassinate decision makers, key decision makers, the chief of staff, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, and so on, so that when it does attack from the air, then the ability of Iran to command and control its forces in retaliation would be undermined. And that proved successful. In terms of targeting key nuclear scientists, that's also tried to decapitate or at least undermine the Iran's march towards militarization of its nuclear capabilities. And it may, in that, slow down, but again, not fully be able to stop the Iranians, because once the Iranians have more than 400 kilo of enriched uraniums, up to 60%. They only need now to enrich it to 90%, and that can be done relatively quickly and possibly in enrichment facilities that the international community is not aware of, somewhere in Iran. So that is the first part of turning uranium into a bomb. The second part is actually creating the bomb, and the know in Iran is already there. So even if they killed some scientists, there will still be others that can create the bomb. And the third one is to mount it on ballistic missiles. And again, Iran has the know-how, even if it will take them some months to do that.
Right. Well, Doctor, over in Washington, officials say Donald Trump had vetoed an Israeli plan in recent days to kill Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Has the U.S. president had any direct role in the Israeli offensive, though?
There's a lot of speculations. I think when you talk about what Trump either did or will do, I think less and less analysts are willing to risk their reputation by making such conjectures. I think the Americans certainly knew about it. We are looking at many years of very close intelligence cooperation between the Americans and the Israelis. So America certainly, supported the gathering of intelligence on the Iranian targets. Whether Trump decidedly said that he doesn't want Israel to intervene or interfere before the non-military venues were fully explored, it's hard to know. But certainly the Americans gave a green light, because otherwise Israel would not have been able to pull that through. Now, as to the future, the Americans don't want to get involved.
Right.
They may help, and they have helped Israel to defend itself, but in terms of getting, into the offensive side of Israel's attack, They don't want that. The Iranians are aware of that. And the Iranians, I don't think, will do well to actually target American assets, which could prompt America to join. So what we're looking at the moment is a very delicate situation. The Iranians don't want the Americans involved, but some miscalculation can take place that will, lead to American intervention, and that will change the whole situation, the whole power relations between the two sides. So the Israelis are quite keen to draw the Americans in, but hopefully that will not happen.
All right. Well, a lot of this comes back to Iran's nuclear program. I mean, Israel sees it as an existential threat, while Iran insists it's peaceful. So, what's the current state of that program, and how close is Iran to developing a nuclear weapon if it wanted to?
Well, that's again, there's disagreement between the intelligence agencies in the US and Israel, in Europe as well. Germans, French, and British, they all have their views. My read of it is that the Iranians have not made the full decision to go full nuclear, but what they do want to do is to get as close as possible. And for that, they've enriched uranium up to 60%. There's no civilian use for uranium enriched in 60%. So they did that specifically to allow themselves to be close to the creation of an atomic military capability. And that's what the Israelis were concerned about. And the international community, the Atomic Energy Agency, has also pointed out that Iran is doing some things that they did not disclose and therefore violated their agreement over what the Atomic Agency should be looking at. So that's another reason why Israel and maybe others are thinking that the Iranians are moving towards a bomb. In terms of how long it will take, usually scientists say that to enrich uranium from 60% to 90 is only a matter of days. As to the other two parts, it may take, some say some months, some say up to a year, till Iranian capability can launch ballistic missiles into Israel with nuke heads. So this is what we're looking at the moment.
Right, right. Well, other than Iran's nuclear program here, Doctor, will Iran's energy grid or oil reserves be Israel's next targets in its bid for regime change?
Well, I'm not sure if the targeting of oil and gas has to do with regime change. I think Israel is trying to prevent Iran from targeting civilians in the major cities of Israel, Tel Aviv and Haifa. And as a result, it already fired at some civilian installations and refineries as a warning. It can do a lot of damage, but the international system is very much, including the Americans, are very much against that, because either if Israel hits the Iranian refineries, then Iran could do two things. It can either target in retaliation the same installations in the Gulf states, or it can close the Hormuz Straits, through which about 20% of the world's oil is coming out, or through those straits from the Persian Gulf. So in either case, the oil prices that have already shot up can go all the way to, some say, $130 per barrel, which will create huge problems economically around the world. So the international community, the Americans, and the rest of the world is very much afraid of that.
Right.
And so they will try to rein in Israel from inflicting such damage.
I mean, speaking of which, there's growing concern that this conflict won't remain between just Israel and Iran. So what's the risk of it spilling into Lebanon, Iraq, or the Gulf states, Doctor? Are regional militias likely to get involved as well?
Well, I don't see, other than, the possibility of Iran firing at, refineries in the Gulf states, I don't see the Gulf states taking any active part. Jordan has reportedly fired at some missiles going through its sovereign territory towards Israel, but the Arab countries have not taken active part so far. In terms of the Houthis, they have obviously already been firing rockets, so they will continue to do that. I think the question around Lebanon and Hezbollah is very important, because Hezbollah, its capabilities have very severely been diminished but it is also at the moment is facing the wrath of the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army, saying to them, if you get involved, we will cop an Israeli retaliation. Don't dare doing that. So far, the Hezbollah has not taken active part in the firing, but if it does, then definitely there will be a major escalation. And the only other party that can join the fighting are the Americans, and we've already covered that. The Americans don't want that. But if they do, that'll be a major blow for the Iranians.
All right. Well, G7 leaders will gather in the Canadian Rockies today with the Israel-Iran conflict expected to be, high on the agenda. German Chancellor Merz has mentioned balancing Israel's right to defend itself with avoiding escalation and for Iran to not develop or possess nuclear weapons. So, Doctor, given this backdrop, how high on the agenda is this going to be for G7 leaders?
Well, I'm sure it's going to be very high. As I said, economic risks are plentiful and very significant, but also regional instability in the Middle East. I think time for diplomacy, which the G7 will push very hard for, is not yet there because, as I said, both the Iranians and the Israelis are not ready to stop the fighting. The Iranians need to gain face, and they'll do that over time. The Israelis are continuing their efforts to try and dismantle the nuclear capability and maybe other military capabilities of Iran. So I think the firing will continue, the war will continue, and as soon as possible, the international community will try to get the sides into negotiations, but this will take a bit more time.
Okay, so how much influence does a summit like this actually have in calming the waters between Iran and Israel?
I think very little. Iran at the moment is quite isolated. I think the rest of the world is quite fearful of a nuclear capability in the hands of Iran and potentially its proxies. So nobody's really, other than condemnation of Israel, nobody's actively supporting it, including its two main allies, which are the Russians and the Chinese. Both have condemned Israel, but did not take any stronger steps. So I don't see the G7 doing anything beyond condemnation and calling for, diplomatic negotiations.
All right. Well, before we let you go here, Dr. Mayroz, with everything happening so fast, what are the most important things to watch over the next 48 to 72 hours, and how might this continue to unfold?
I think Israel has, clear passage above Iran to pretty much anywhere it wants to go, and it will continue, firing and trying to eliminate potential threats. The Iranians still have, some say, up to 2,000 ballistic missiles, some of them quite advanced, that it will continue to fire at Israel. But what we need to see is, again, one thing is the Americans. How and when will they either, side with Israel, which they already started in terms of defense, but any kind of escalation, as well as what will happen to the, oil refineries, both in Iran or in the Gulf states, and what will happen to the Hormuz Straits that Iran has threatened to block. These are the main things to look at and hope for, quick ability to get into diplomatic negotiations, which will be really the only way for Israel to prevent Iran from, in the long term, from getting nuclear capabilities, and for Iran to stop the Israeli attacks.
Right. Well, some great insights from you there. Thank you so much, Dr. Mayroz, for unpacking all of these developments with us.
No worries, and good evening.
Thank you. That was Dr. Eyal Mayroz, who is a senior lecturer of peace and conflict studies at the University of Sydney. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.